Dive into the pulse of Bills football with Turf to Tape, where veteran sideline reporters Sal Capaccio and film room guru Erik Turner deliver a one-of-a-kind podcast experience, combining Sal's unparalleled access to players and coaches with Erik's razor-sharp film breakdowns. The show bridges the gap between casual fans and hardcore enthusiasts. This is Turf to Tape.
This is Turf to Tape, presented by Thin Man Brewery. I'm your host, Erik Turner, and usually Sal Capaccio is joining us, but he's on his way back from the Combine. He's a busy man, so I had Colin Ritchie, our producer, the man behind the scenes, someone that you've probably seen on Cover 1 Buffalo, join me to discuss some of the takeaways from the NFL Scouting Combine. So, Colin, welcome onto the show, of course, for the first time, on stage with us, but also thank you for all the work you do behind the scenes for us and for Cover 1 Buffalo.
Oh, of course. It's my pleasure. Excited to be making my Turf to Tape hosting debut.
Now, it's going to be a fun episode. We're going to discuss some of the pressers from Brandon Beane, Joe Brady. We have some clips from those pressers, discuss a little bit about the Combine, because for you and I, we're still pretty early on when it comes to the evaluation side of things, because we kind of compartmentalized the offseason and started with free agency. As you guys know, we did a ton of work in evaluation, especially in the film room and Cover 1 Buffalo, when it comes to free agency and some of the targets. And so we've been really focused in on that. But obviously the Combine was this week. The medical checks are usually the most important thing. But early on in the week, the GMs and head coaches have their moment in the sun, kind of spotlighting, a 10 to 15 minute interviews, about the Combine and things going on behind the scenes. So from the top down, man, from what you've seen from them, but also the first few days of on-field work, what have been some of your overall takeaways from the NFL Scouting Combine in Indy?
Yeah, well, I think the first name I want to invoke here is Sonny Styles, who crushed it at all of his drills, set a couple records for linebackers in different drills. I saw for relative athletic score from first-round linebackers since they started that grading system. It's been Luke Kuechly, Brian Urlacher with a perfect 10, and then Sonny Styles has a 9.99, and he'll be now the third highest RAS score from a first-round linebacker, who's probably going to be a top 10 pick just because of how athletic, how smart, and how dominant he is on the field. We saw he was amazing at Ohio State this past year. A lot of Ohio State guys could be going early. Carnell Tate, Caleb Downs, Arvell Reese too. So what a school and what a player Sonny Styles is.
The off-the-ball linebackers, it's kind of nice for the Bills to be kind of in that market right now, because it's deep. It's super deep and all sizes, but even some of the guys that, because I personally think the Bills need an off-the-ball guy that has a little more size. You don't want to really, get away from the athletic guys, but you want guys with a little more size, a little more height and weight to them. And, obviously some length to get off of blocks to pair with Terrell Bernard and what we assume is going to be more of an odd front. And this draft at that position is loaded. And you're not going to be sacrificing, as you said, you're not going to be sacrificing a lot of athleticism at that position this year. So that's exciting from a Bill sense. And this is one of those combines, off seasons, evaluation phases that's interesting, because the Bills are going through some changes on that side of the ball, on the defensive side of the ball. Right. New staff, new ideas, the meetings that are happening between Brandon Beane and Jim Letter on that side of the ball are ongoing. And he said that at his pressers. They're looking for different skills, traits, body types. But it's exciting for not just them, but for us, because there's new blood in the building. There's new thoughts, new ideas. And so we saw some of that kind of come out, at the pressers when discussing the relationship with, the evaluation, the front office, and the coaching staff. So listen in.
It's been fun. Anytime you have, new people, new ideas, you're kind of just sharing experiences and thoughts. And I think I've talked about it some. I know I just talked about it over there, but after Jim got settled and, Joe and, before Joe hired him, we talked about how, the attractiveness, if he were to hire Jim, he kind of went through his candidates of how they would run their defense. And one of the attractive pieces that Jim brought was the multiplicity and the different variations and going more to a 5 down front and a 3-4 scheme. But one of the great things, and I think that was relieving to our personnel staff, was when he sat in there for, with Joe for an hour 15, hour and a half, was, listen, guys, we want good football players. We don't want to force, a square peg in a round hole. Like, yes, if things are even, we would prefer this as our Sam backer, or this is our corner. This is how we want our safeties to be, whether it's interchangeable or a box and a free. So we kind of went through all those things. But at the end of the day, these guys have a good vision, a good plan, and those discussions are not final. We're still talking through, and even sometimes those conversations come up at night when when we're in these meeting rooms, meeting with some of these players when they kind of walk out, and kind of re-sparks conversation. So that will continue over the coming weeks into free agency, and then of course into the draft.
And you gotta imagine, they're kind of behind the 8 ball like you and I when it comes to evaluation, if I'm talking about the coaching staff, because essentially what happens is the front office, the scouts, those guys, the college scouts, they bring, hey, a list. Okay, you're trying to run this defense. These are the traits you're looking for. And we discuss, these are the guys that kind of fit that pool. These are the guys that are coming in for those interviews. These are the type of, you have to ask these questions to those guys and participate in those interviews. And so it's cool to hear that, hey, a guy could walk in the room, they evaluate him, they put him on the whiteboard, they watch him with his film, whatever approach they're taking for the interview. At the end of it, they're like, oh, okay, so maybe he's more of a Sam instead of a Will. Maybe he's more of a, Jack, where he's off the ball linebacker versus on the edge, on the ball. And so, again, much like us, they're kind of a little bit behind the 8 ball as far as the coaching staff, because they're worried about putting that coaching staff together, not necessarily evaluating the college talent.
Right. Well, even Brandon Beane and his staff, up until a couple weeks into January, they were evaluating defensive players under the scope of how will they fit into Sean McDermott's defense.
Yes.
And now you fire Sean McDermott, you have to wait a period of time to hire Joe Brady, wait another period of time for him to hire Jim Leonard. And now, okay, you're looking for guys that would fit into his 3-4 scheme, which we saw in Denver the last couple of years.
Right. Yeah. It's and that's what's funny too, because a lot of fans are like, wow, you know what? Now it opens up a whole different sample. Yes, it's true. It'll open up a different sample of players based on their height, weight, measurables, and defenses they played in. But it's also going to close the door on some other guys that they're used to getting. And so they have to reevaluate their board. They have to reshuffle their board based on what Jim Leonard wants on the defensive side of the ball. So for the next segment, Colin, I want to talk about the face-to-face visits, because there are more and more teams like the Rams and the Jags that don't care about being at the combine and being face-to-face with these prospects. And so for this next segment, which is our tapped in segment presented by Thin Man Brewery, I want to talk about that, when it comes to Brandon Beane being there, because he cares about this sort of stuff.
Yeah, well, the face-to-face interviews, like you mentioned, is something that we see every year in the Bills Embedded or any of the behind-the-scenes things that we get on who they draft. Obviously, there's the infamous Kyer Elam notebook thing, and I know there were some discussions on Twitter like, oh, well, do the Bills even draft Kyer Elam if they don't meet with him at the combine and see his notebook, which I think is a bit overblown. But yeah, obviously there's different options for different coaches, and we've seen some of the younger coaches like Sean McVay and Liam Cohen decide not to do these in-person interviews at the combine. But I think it comes down to a matter of preference. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, so listening to what Beane had to say about face-to-face visits, and either way, even if the head coaches and some of the coaching staff aren't there at Indy, they're going back and watching these recorded interviews nonetheless. They just aren't obviously participating and engaging.
Brandon, why is this event so important for you?
Great question. To me personally, and everyone's got their own way to do this, I want every opportunity I can to be in front of as many prospects as we can get in front of. And so whether that's the Senior Bowl, the Combine, the 30 visits, any chance pro days that we can get 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there, because I can tell you from my experiences, sometimes I've felt one way about a player the first interaction and felt differently the second interaction, wherever that may be. And so I just think for me and our team, as many exposures as we can get, and sometimes that's just breaking bread. Sometimes that is on the whiteboard. Sometimes it's watching plays, and you just pick up so many things. Like, we were showing a player last night some good plays, and then we went to a bad play, and he owned up to it. But he had a chance to point to a coach or a teammate, and he didn't, and that just kind of told us how he operates.
So when it comes to those face-to-face visits, there've been informal and formal visits so far at Indy. Who are some of the names? List some of the names that have been kind of put out there on social media or in different articles that the Bills have met with at Indy.
Yeah, so obviously all eyes are going to be at the list of wide receivers. A couple of the guys projected to go in the first round: Jordan Tyson from ASU, Casey Concepcion from Texas A&M, and then a lot of guys that are right now projected to go on day 2 from at least the early mock drafts and early rankings that we're getting. Omar Cooper from Indiana. Denzel Boston also might sneak into the first round from Washington, but Jeremy Bernard from Alabama, Antonio Williams from Clemson, Skylar Bell was an interesting name from UConn. And all of the names that have been reported, there are by far the most so far at wide receiver from what I could find. So whether that's just all the reporters asking the wide receivers because they know the Bills are going to be interested in them, or that's just how it happened to come out. I do think that is something worth noting, though, that it looks like the Bills are definitely doing their due diligence at wide receiver for guys projected to go in day 1 and on day 2.
Yeah, and I think that is part of it. The lead, a lot of the reporters, whether they're Bills reporters or other teams, they, it's one of the first questions that's asked of these prospects when they're on the, in the booth there, who'd you meet with, and, whether it was formal or informal. And so I think that's part of it. But I also think that the Bills, after scouring the free agency list at the wide receiver position, and how much some of the upper end guys are going to make and how even some of the mid-level guys are going to make, it's pretty clear the Bills are heavily invested in not just scouting the wide receiver class there, but also I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that they're going to pick 1, maybe even 2 in this draft, especially, again, once you look at the free agency lists, from this offseason. So another position that stood out that was asked, safety. I think that's another position that, a lot of us have been focusing on because we want to see someone young paired with Cole Bishop, because Cole Bishop stood out last year. He was a breakout candidate last year, but even more so under Jim Leonhard, could take even another step and be weaponized in a lot of ways. So finding a guy that is, more rangier, you don't want him just like playing, free safety, post safety. You want him to be, be able to come down into the box and play in the box if needed. But someone with athleticism like Cole Bishop that has the range, that has ball skills, that when he is back there by himself, he's not only a safety net, but can make some plays, for the Bills. And so pairing someone with Cole Bishop would be nice to see. And the safety class at the combine, they've stood out if we're talking on the field workouts because of their speed and athleticism.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, that is always something really important, especially in years past with Sean McDermott's defense, relying on Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer to be the backbone of the schemes that he was running, disguising coverage and being able to communicate with each other on the field to make adjustments mid-play. Obviously, this is a new defensive scheme now, but that doesn't take away any importance from the safety position, especially in a league where you've got quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson that are very talented at throwing the football, maybe some of the best we've ever seen. Safety being the green dot of the secondary, if you will, and being able to coach everyone on the back end. We saw Cole Bishop kind of take that next step this past season, becoming a leader in the secondary, but then also his play recognition becoming a lot better as well. So sometimes it takes a year or two, but when you have the athleticism to make up for some of your play recognition deficiencies when you first enter the NFL, that can be a big help.
Well, look who we have here. We have a special guest. Of course, Sal Capaccio, man, busy man.
Oh my God.
I always say, hey, you're the man at the intersection of access and insight. And so you're all over the place. You're pulled in different directions, but you're back from Indy, I assume, or you're on.
Yeah, I'm home. I'm not in my normal studio. Capaccio's upstairs. And then true story, I apologize. This is my Sunday calendar. I put Sal podcast in here with my wife's Bari class and batting cages for Max. And then when you text me, I'm like, oh my God, I have it in my calendar for tomorrow, not today. So my apologies, everybody. So I just jumped on here. I'm literally in my dining room, but I kind of use this a little bit sometimes. Maybe so. Hopefully the audio is okay. But I am back from Indy. I've always said that it's different now at the combine for people who cover the team where the Bills don't have a top pick. So I don't really stick around for the prospects. You just don't know what's going to happen. You can get all that info. So I just go mainly for Brady and Bean, and used to be McDermott. But yeah, sorry about that. But good to be with you guys. And man, you're flowing. You're going great. But anything that I can help with from the combine, I'm with you here.
Yeah. So we're discussing face-to-face visits with Brandon Bean. Coaches not doing that, but mainly the guys that have been confirmed have met with the Bills. Any of those players stand out to you from some of the interviews you've seen, the positions they play, what they're focusing on? Anything stand out to you in regards to that?
I've really warmed up to Casey Concepcion. I think that he's a guy that I really like because, first of all, I didn't even know he was born in Rochester until we found that out, yesterday, a couple of days ago. Really cool. But he moved out of the area when he was younger, went down to Charlotte, North Carolina. Obviously, Texas A&M, he won the Paul Hornung Award, and that's given to the most versatile player in college football. Travis Hunter won it 2 years in a row. It doesn't have to go to an offensive guy either. Jabril Peppers won it several years ago. Saquon Barkley. So just to show you the versatility that he has, where's that versatility come from? It's really playing wide receiver and being a return man, right? And a dynamic return man. And lo and behold, Bills need a return man, guys. I mean, you could say they have McCole Hardman. That's fine, but how much can you rely on him? I think they need a young, dynamic return man to add into the mix that you can play at a position where you don't have to worry about just having him as a separate position sort of to take up a roster spot. So I really like him a lot. I didn't see the safeties. Did the kid from Toledo meet with the Bills? I don't remember if
I haven't seen anything on him meeting with the Bills yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't, but it just hasn't been reported yet.
Yeah. And so I like that. It's funny. So on my flight home, Syracuse punter Jack Stonehouse was in front of me. He was sitting in front of me. And there was another punter, Ryan Eckley, I believe, from Michigan State.
Yep.
Totally off the wall. I just said, hey, Bills need a punter. Do you guys meet with them? Yep. It is a position the Bills have to address this offseason. They went through 3 last year, and they don't have one on the roster right now. So I know we don't talk about something like that, but they're going to have to use resources on that this year.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I love the special teams angle, whether you're talking Concepcion, essentially 2 for 1, wide receiver and returner. But he's also versatile when it comes to outside, inside. He's just a playmaker. And I know a lot of Bills fans are just looking for, hey, someone just to play X, someone just to play boundary. But, the game has changed a lot in that regards. There aren't that many just X boundary type guys. So moving guys around, guys with versatility are huge. And yeah, the special teams angle with the punters, it would be nice to get a guy that they could just lock in and be done for 10, 12 years or more and have that guy as a punter for the long term.
Yeah. And listen, Jeff Rogers, new special teams coordinator, right? You want to give him a few tools to work with too. So I do think that that's, something on the table here. We also don't know the future of Tyler Bass right now. Right. I did ask Sean McDermott specifically. I apologize. I say Sean McDermott. It's just a natural reflex. I did ask Brandon Bean about, some of the injured guys right now, Michael Hoyt, Landon Jackson, and Tyler Bass specifically. I did not include Dwayne Carter, and I should have asked him. I'm sure he would have put him in the same boat here, but he said Bass is the furthest along. He doesn't have a timeline on any of them specifically, but I still wonder. I'm not guessing they're going to move off Tyler Bass, but man, coming off the injury, he didn't kick last year. He's got a decent salary cap hit, right? Like you could find your way there if you really needed to, but it is something they're going to have to look at and think about. So that's an area as they massage this roster. And I don't want to spend so much on special teams, but it matters. Sam Franklin Jr. was just signed.
Yes. Yep.
To an extension. And people say, why would they give a special teams guy $7.5 million? Well, let's see what the details are.
Right.
My guess is it's going to be a pretty low cap number this year. And that's why you give him a 3-year deal to spread it out. And he is a core special teams guy. You want to have a guy like that. He might not even count top 51 this year. You know what I mean? For the offseason, for salary caps. But I think that you got to do that, guys, in order to figure out and say, okay, we're getting that settled. So now we can attack what we need to at the top end of the roster, whether that's defense or wide receiver.
This Tapped In segment was presented by Thin Man Brewery. And if you guys haven't heard, Thin Man Community Beer Works and Smolder Society is now open at 166 Chandler Street in Buffalo. Chandler Street Breweries. It's open Wednesday through Sunday, noon every day for lunch. It's a really, really cool facility there. And so if you guys haven't been out there, make sure to take a look. Again, 166 Chandler Street. It's awesome tap room there. Again, presented by Thin Man Brewery. So with that said, Sal, I'm kind of worried about the combine. I want to get your thoughts on it too, Colin, because it seems like over the years, it's every year, it's less and less participation. It started with, hey, less guys are participating in the 3-cone. Now less guys are just running their 40s, which has always been kind of the benchmark for the scouting combine. So what are your thoughts on the future of the combine? Does it worry you or concern you at all that guys are now just choosing not to run and do different drills as we're going forward? Is that something that is starting to worry yourself and maybe others that go there every single year?
Yeah, from a participation standpoint, for sure. And I get it. I do. And we can all say, well, that sucks and they should work out. But, think of it from an athlete and an agent standpoint. Like, why do I need to do this if I can do this in my pro day, have my own environment, right? You guys have scouted these guys for so many months. What are you really learning about my player other than the interviews? The interviews matter, but you can do those in a lot of different ways. So there was somebody I heard yesterday, I don't remember who it was, said they predicted the combine would not even be existing in 10 years. And maybe that's the case. That's a long way down the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part of it, but again, for me, it's changed. Like, I like the fact, I'll be honest with you, it's cool that we can watch all this. If you just told me that the combine would exist and we wouldn't have the on-field testing, but everything else would be the same, right now I'd be okay with it. Now, if the Bills were picking top 10, I would hate that.
Yeah.
Right. But right now I'd be okay with it. Tell me, are we still getting head coaches and GMs and players going to podiums and talking? We're still getting the 45 interviews for the players. I could live with that. I mean, I'm the guy that came home before the on-field testing really started happening, because that's the other part that's important to me.
Yeah. What do you think, Colin?
Yeah, like Sal said, I think the on-field testing for a team like the Bills is secondary to meeting the players face to face. We heard Brandon Beane talk about how important that aspect of it is. But then also in terms of the drills, this was Warren Sharp's tweet, Erik, that you and I were talking about before the show started, that, they're setting all these best ranks since 2003, but is that just a product of a lot of guys not participating, and so the sample size is smaller? Or is this class just super athletic? It's probably a bit of both, but it's certainly not what it once was. But on the flip side, it's a great chance for guys maybe projected to go in the 5th or 6th round, boost their draft stock, make more of a name for themselves. A guy like Red Murdoch from UB, who gets a combine invite after Joe Andreessen and Sean Dolak don't. Red Murdoch not only making a bigger name for himself, but a bigger name for the football program at University of Buffalo as well.
Yeah, and we led the show off with, obviously the medical checks are the most important part of Indy, and that's usually the priority and the most important part. But Justice Mosqueda, he did a research and article on the combine, and it said day one of the combine had a 37% participation rate, down 18% year over year compared to 2025. The 3-cone had a 50% participation rate pre-pandemic. It's just 13% now. So it's those type of things that kind of worry me. And then you look at these numbers, as Colin said, and yeah, those are great. Those stand out. But at the same time, if you're not fast, if you're not measuring, you're not going to measure well. If you plan on just doing everything at your pro day, you're going to get these numbers boosted up a little bit because the sample is a little smaller. So it does kind of worry me about the long term of the on-field workout stuff, because more and more guys aren't participating. But at the same time, putting it in perspective, the interviews, the behind-the-scenes interviews for these teams and those prospects, and the medical checks are the top two things. I don't think that's ever going to change.
No, and listen, I'm sorry, Colin, I interrupt you. So I was told years ago, and I think this holds true, even more so as we go on here, which is, you have to trust the file you put together on the prospect for the last 6 months or 2 years or 3 years, whatever it is. The combine is really more confirmation than anything.
Yeah.
If a guy goes to a combine and he just knocks your socks off at a totally different kind of like great workout that you did not expect, you kind of have to go, well, he probably trained for that. You have to rely. Don't be too swayed by it. How many times have we seen combine workout warriors, right? That get overdrafted because of that. You got to be careful of that and say, let's rely on what we've seen from him on film. And yeah, they can get better and those kinds of things. But the flip side is even more important, which is a guy goes to the combine and he doesn't perform as well as you think. Say, you know what? Let's not let that sour. Let's go back and rely on what we've watched from him and say, like, what did we miss on him? Is there something we're not seeing? Because, you take this 40 time, it wasn't as good as we thought. Okay, Is that real? Like, what did we miss here? And I've been told by multiple executives over the years, like, that's really what it's for. If you're doing your job for the last 6 months, year, 2 years, then you don't have to really worry too much about any variance in the combine. And it's more just about making sure.
And I also think, and Colin and I talked about this before recording, I think that guys that are mid-round guys or even later round guys that are athletically gifted, but maybe whose film aren't as good, it is going to lead to that recheck, but it's also going to lead to them standing out at these combines because they're athletically gifted, and not only forcing guys to go back to the film, but it's helping them boost their stock. It's only going to help them in a lot of ways. The guys that aren't participating, whether it's because they're doing it at the pro day or because they just know they're not going to run well, I think you start to question some of these prospects that are probably going high. And now you're like, okay, why is he so worried about this? Why isn't he competing? So I think it works on both ends. Again, this is just such an evolution of the combine. And, whether we're talking the on-field drills or the guys participating or not, it's such an evolution of this combine. It's going to be interesting to see the future of it as we go forward. And the Bills moving forward, they brought on John Fox. You asked a great question to Joe Brady about John Fox and bringing him onto the staff. So I wanted to go ahead and play that question that you had, Sal, for Joe Brady, and then we'll discuss it.
What does John Fox bring to you? Why did you want to bring a guy like John Fox and specifically him?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think anytime 16 years of head coaching experience, I think that was the number one thing that intrigued me. But I think I've been on some staffs where you get some guys that you bring them in as like senior assistants, and it's like, hey, I need a guy I can lean on through some head coaching moments. Well, I didn't want somebody that was strictly just in an office, just waiting for, hey, when do you need some help? I wanted a guy that wanted to still coach football, right? And so Coach Fox he's sitting in the defensive meetings, he's giving ideas, he's going through it all. And then, hey, when things go, I know he's a guy that's not going to just be a yes man, right? He's been through it all, and someone that I can lean on in those moments.
A great sounding board for Joe Brady, right, Sal? But
100%.
Not just for Joe Brady. Talk about the other dynamic that he's going to add to the Bills coaching staff, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
I mean, think about it. You're getting a 2-for-1 really in John Fox, right? You're getting a guy who sat in that chair, who's been through it before as a head coach, multiple organizations. He's been to Super Bowls, and he can be to Joe Brady what Leslie Frazier was to Sean McDermott his first several years, and what Leslie Frazier was to Mike McDonald his first 2 years, and now has a Super Bowl, by the way, right? By the way, saw Leslie at the Combine. Congratulations. Love talking with Leslie Frazier. One of my favorite people ever in football to be around and cover and talk to. Leslie Frazier, amazing human being and coach. He now has a Super Bowl from the 85 Bears as a player, and now the 2025 Seahawks. How cool is that, right? Yeah. But you can rely on him in that regard. And then look, I mean, Jim Leonard, this is his first time ever calling plays at the NFL level, defensive coordinator. He's done it in Wisconsin, and of course he's been in the NFL. But John Fox provides that stability as well for Jim Leonard to lean on. I think that you really have what Joe Brady's created here is it's not just John Fox. Pete Carmichael Jr. factors in. So on his side of the ball, he's got Pete Carmichael Jr., who's kind of his John Fox to the defensive side of the ball to Jim Leonard. Did you see the story from Sean Payton about Pete Carmichael Jr.? He was talking about him, and it was kind of brought up, wasn't specifically asked about him. He was asked, he was telling a story to, I think it was Pat McAfee show, it might have been, I'm not really sure. And he told a story about how he couldn't call plays one year. It was a game against the Colts because something had happened. He had an injury or something. He couldn't be on the sidelines. He couldn't call plays. He goes, so that one game, Pete Carmichael called plays and we won 62-7. And it reminded me of when Joe Brady said to me and Matt Bove in our podcast, we specifically asked, what does an offensive coordinator do who doesn't call plays? You know what his response was? Be ready to call plays.
Ready to call, yeah.
Pete Carmichael Jr. was ready to call plays that day, 62-7. They want to beat the Colts, and Peyton was having fun with it, going, wait a minute, what are you doing? I got a contract coming up. You can't be that good.
Yeah. Colin, your thoughts, man? Obviously a very experienced coordinator, but also a very experienced head coach, John Fox, on the staff with the Bills.
Right. That experience, especially as a head coach, is not easy to find. I think it's a great way to combat the fact that you have a lot of new staff members in new positions, whether it be Jim Leonard as a defensive coordinator or a lot of coaches coming from college football into the NFL to be position coaches for the Bills, to mix that with guys that have decades of experience working in the NFL. I think that's the best way to make sure there's a healthy transition and also a healthy relationship between experience and the new experienced coaches.
I like it because he's on a different side of the ball. Joe Brady's now the head coach. He's going to be juggling a lot of different things, but he's an offensive-minded guy. Generally, offensive-minded guys are aggressive. Now you have an old school type guy that can be the sounding board for Joe. Like, hey, now is not the time to be aggressive. Kind of like the guy on his shoulder saying, you know what, now's not the time. Let's not be aggressive here. Let's pull the reins back a little bit. There's a lot of game left. I like having that contradicting voice in his head as a guy that's been in the league a long time and with the experience that John Fox has, not just in the league, but in big games. And so, Sal, another awesome question that you had for Joe Brady had to do with, the Bills re-signing Alec Anderson. You talked about the Bills bringing back Sam Franklin as well and Fedarian Mathis. But when you asked about Alec Anderson and what he brought, and Joe Brady talked about the nastiness, that edge, but that Bills red persona, yes. That's something that a lot of fans maybe forget about or don't even really know about. So I wanted to play this clip and have you discuss that.
An ability for a guy maybe to be a starter. How do you weigh that sometimes? Is he better at one job to be the starter or a guy we can use all over the place sometimes for a guy?
Yeah, I mean, look, everybody has a role on your football team as it kind of gets to the season time. But in the offseason, man, you want a bunch of guys that are sitting there having the mindset like, here we go, I'm going and I'm going to take it and I'm going to be the starter, right? And I don't want people always to be happy with the role come the season time. But a guy like Alec a couple years ago was the jumbo, and man, he embraced it, right? And then last year he didn't play as much. We fortunately we had Jackson Hawes, didn't have to live in the jumbo world. But when he had the opportunities to go in, he didn't blink. And you want guys like Alec Anderson on your football team, right? Like the type of edge he plays with. We talk a lot about Bills blue, like type of players. Well, we also want some Bills red guys, some guys that have an edge, a little bit of personality to them. And as we know, Alec Anderson, sometimes I need him to not talk, but he does it a lot, and I love him for it. So I was so excited to get him back.
So he referred to Anderson as, being a Bills red type guy, and, the versatility obviously always stood out with him. The Bills did it with, Ryan Bates. He's been kind of that mold, different positions, sixth man. David Edwards did it as well. Alec Anderson, Bills red. Can you kind of talk about what that means to the Bills, the evaluation staff? Because it is evaluation season, and having guys that are Bills red or Bills blue and mark that when they're evaluating, and how important that is when we're talking about, hey, if I'm picking between two guys, well, this guy's Bills blue or blue, Bills red, what that means to the staff.
Yeah, I mean, the nastiness, right? They want an edge, the nastiness, like he said. There can be a time where there are times where Alec Anderson goes over the edge a little bit too much, where you don't want him to be the guy that's kind of getting into every single little scrum and caution your team. But at the same time, you need guys who are going to, make sure that everybody else kind of rallies around. I remember specifically the Pittsburgh Steelers game when Josh got kind of pushed a little bit towards the sideline, and I was standing right there, and it fired up the sideline, and like guys like Alec Anderson were right there to get in the face of the Pittsburgh Steelers, and that kind of turned the game a little bit. Like that was a big deal in that game, and you need guys who have that edge, right? And the Bills want that. They want guys that go to that line, don't cross the line, but you need guys who really, it matters to them. Football matters to them. Being there for their teammates, accountable to them matters. The first part of his quote, the question I asked him, I think was very interesting to me, which is, I said, well, like when you got a guy that you could have to decide, okay, is he better at just making sure he's available at all these positions? He can do all these things, 5 different spots in the line. But he also wants to be a starter, right? Like, is he better at being a starter and having him right there? And his response was interesting. He said, when the season starts, everybody has a role. But in the offseason, you want guys who want to be a starter. That tells me right now, I want Alec Anderson to want to be a starter and want that job, and he's going to have every opportunity to win it.
All right, Colin, your thoughts before we get you out of here so you can get to work.
Yeah, I mean, like Sal was saying, sometimes it's a matter of not wanting to be too good at the job you don't want, right? Like Alec Anderson, extremely versatile, and you lose a versatile piece like that if he becomes a starter. But at the same time, especially when you have Josh Allen under center, you want to put the 5 best guys out there to protect him. That's the number one priority. And right now it's looking like Alec Anderson is going to be one of those 5 guys, assuming that Connor McGovern and David Edwards depart in free agency. And so pairing him with who's likely another Bills red guy and Spencer Brown on the offensive line. Now you've got 2 of those edge guys, 2 of those nasty guys to go along with some more of the Bills blue finesse guys like Deion Dawkins.
Oh, great point, man. Great point. All right, Colin, get out of here. Get to work. Appreciate you pinch hitting for Sal for a little bit for us.
Yeah, thank you.
All of the hard work you do behind the scenes for us, and also covering Buffalo and your appearances on there each and every week. So take it easy, brother. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, guys.
Sal, so when it comes to that, it reminds me about Ryan Groy years ago, right after Eric Wood retired. I remember working for the Athletic and writing for them and asking Eric Wood about Ryan Groy, the versatility and how that sometimes hurts players.
Yep.
And he said the same thing. He was like, coaches do think that way, where, hey, he's our swing guy, whether it's interior or on the edge. And that has value, sometimes more value than just him as a starter. Maybe he doesn't stand out enough to risk him as that swing guy. And so I'm interested to see where Anderson slots in, whether it's guard or center, because he can play both those positions. They obviously have Van Pran Granger as well, that's played center and probably could even bump out a little bit to guard. But it'll be interesting to see how he slots in. And it's another thing when we're in this part of the season, the offseason evaluation time, is the Bills, literally their front office, their scouting staff, their coaches, they have these type of labels. Every team has them too, right? They're like blue chip type players, foundational guys, injury prone guys. Like, they label these guys certain things. Bills blue and Bills red are something that this team uses. And Bills red, we talked about it, the edge, the mentality, the nastiness, the physicality, the, willingness to step in there, step up for their quarterback and be that enforcer. But also Bills blue guys, foundation guys, culture guys, detail oriented, process driven, all those buzzwords that McDermott instilled. These are the kind of guys that Brandon Beane and this front office look for, their scouts look for, and they mark when they're on the road evaluating these players.
Yeah, and there's going to be a new culture here, right? I mean, we know that. You have a changeover from Sean McDermott to Joe Brady, and Joe Brady recognized what Sean McDermott built for 9 years when he was at his introductory press conference, how important it was, the culture, this foundation, how important that still remains inside the building. But you're going to have a brand new culture under the leadership of Joe Brady, and you're going to have a brand new culture, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I just find it fascinating, Erik, that for the last 9 years, essentially for the most part, we knew what the defense would look like schematically. We just had to figure out the parts they would put in there, right?
Yeah.
This year's totally different. We don't know schematically what the defense is going to look like, and we're going to figure that out on the fly, kind of based on the players they go out and get. But that's also going to be a new culture on defense, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, how you want to attack. And, there's always going to be your base principles. You want to create turnovers. You don't want to take penalties, buckle in the red zone, all those things, cliches that we say. I do think, though, there's going to be a bit of a mentality change on the defensive side of the ball. And we're going to start to see how that's going to formulate based on the players they're going to acquire.
Yeah. And we assume it's more attack oriented. Yes. And I think you're going to see that reflected, like you said, in the personnel that they bring in free agency, but also in the draft. And this is one of those drafts when you're talking about what we assume they're going to be shifting to or transitioning to in the next year or two. They're going to have different skill sets at different positions than what we're used to, as you said, the last 8 to 9 years under Sean McDermott. So finally, the other big talking point from the combine was the usage of Khalil Shakir, whether the Bills should be using him more on the boundary versus the slot. And Joe Brady had said multiple times this offseason that Shakir can play both positions. He's smart enough. He's got the talent physically. And so a lot of fans are like, well, then why didn't you do it? You were the coordinator. But this is a great question to Brady about Shakir. And again, kind of lends to your point about, hey, free agency and the draft is not only going to affect the defensive side, but also what they can do personnel-wise on offense with some of the wide receivers that are in this draft.
People said he got a bit one-dimensional with his usage. What can we expect from him going into this coming season?
Yeah, I think no different than Khalil and everybody else, right? It's as we put together this roster, just finding different ways to utilize the guys where it's not the same year in and year out. And I think Khalil can play inside and outside, right? And there's really not a lot of things Khalil can't do. And as we watch cut-ups and as we go through things and put it all together, it's there's definitely ways to get the ball in his hands in different ways. And we have to continue to grow his game because he's such a huge component to our offense, right? He's one of our best football players, and when the ball's in his hands, good things is happening, and it doesn't necessarily always have to be in a short range. You know what I mean?
So last year, boundary alignment wise, he was out wide 238 snaps in 2025 compared to 452 in the slot. About 34% of his snaps were on the boundary, only 28% in 2024. So what about Shakir thinks that, he could play a little more out there and be successful like he's had the success in the slot?
So I think that Khalil Shakir is really smart. That's number one. That's where it starts. If you're going to play receiver at any position on the field, you have to understand leverage. You have to understand what we call choice routes or option routes and what your quarterback is thinking. Are you on the same page? And that goes with, just understanding throughout the week what the game plan is, who your different corners are and your safeties are, and your defensive schemes that you're going against. It's so detail oriented. That's number one. That's why I think that a guy like Khalil Shakir can do that. Now, I'm skeptical if, he can be a 17 game, put him on the boundary and be a, legit wide receiver every week. And I don't think that Joe Brady's saying that. He's not saying that. He's saying I can use them all over the place. And what he said at one point was, when they break the huddle, you don't know where he's going to be, right? Yeah. So you have to kind of figure that out on the fly if you're the defense. And I like that. Also, he's a strong guy. We know that because he's not physically a freak, right? But he's a strong guy. I think he can handle some of the rigors of the outside, even at his body, thinking about how he pinballs off when he has the ball in his hands and guys try to tackle him and things like that. You need some play strength to be able to play on the outside because you have some physical corners out there. So I just think that there's some nuances to playing on the outside that he can do just fine. What he's not going to give you is that straight line burning speed from being on the boundary. He's not going to be, cooking guys left and right on, getting to the deep levels, but he's a good route runner, right? I mean, there are things that he can do on the outside to help Josh Allen that come from his smarts and his ability to use his body the right way.
It starts with his high IQ. Yes, he could play on the outside. He can, be in different formation, inside, outside. But I also think that is so much more important to Josh Allen in this offense the last couple of years as a slot guy, because he's the hot read. He's that sight adjustment when teams are blitzing. He's that reliable guy that the Cole Beasley was early in Josh's career. And so I think when you put him on the outside, you're changing his role. And are there guys that can replace him inside to be that safety blanket for Josh? There just hasn't, because Kincaid's been hurt so much. And so week in and week out, I was told from players that Shakir was that guy in the slot so often because of that, his ability to be trustworthy in, when teams are sending that pressure. But most importantly, when the pressure was coming, every single play on second and third and long, there was a screen built in, a pressure outlet built in for Shakir because of his ability with the ball in his hands that you're talking to, Sal. And so I don't think he can live on the outside as a boundary receiver guy. I don't think he's a guy that runs these refined routes and route trees. I don't think he's a guy that separates with his speed. I think he's that quick game guy, get the ball in his hand guy. I think that's where you hang your hat. But I do think that if the Bills add that speed element that, analysts and fans have been talking about for years, that speed element just doesn't live on the outside. You could bump that speed element into the slot to get that post safety off the middle of the field, to get to the middle of the field against those two high safety looks. And then you're bringing Khalil Shakir over the middle where he lives with a lot more space for him beyond 10 yards, beyond that 5-yard marker that he's used to catching the ball.
You're back 2 years ago. I think we could all revisit the draft and say, boy, they should have taken Ladd McConkey, right? Why did they not take Ladd McConkey? To me, it's because they felt they had a slot guy in Khalil Shakir, and it was a little redundant. Well, you think now fast forward to now, questions about Keon Coleman up in the air with his future in Buffalo. We could talk about outside, inside Keon, all that. But let's just say the Bills might envision a world where, hey, maybe we can bump Khalil out and we now can draft a slot guy, a guy that can fit there. Like we didn't think we could do that 2 years ago with Ladd McConkey, but now we can, right? And maybe it gets them more to what we thought they should have done 2 years ago, and people thought that.
Yeah, hopefully they learn from that, right? You just stop just drafting for a specific role. Just draft good players, draft Ladd McConkey. There's the same argument on the defensive side of ball years ago when Trent McDuffie was there for the Bills, because the Bills, I was told, thought that Trent was just slot only. Well, hopefully they learn from that, because Trent, although his best game has been played at slot, he survived on the boundary for a good amount of snaps as well. And so hopefully the Bills have learned from those, evaluations, those missteps. And, Brandon Beane, he lived to see another day. And so maybe now those scars are healing and he can learn from that when we're talking Khalil Shakir and moving him around. Because even if he's not the primary as a boundary guy, just putting him out there changes coverages, changes tendencies, and really makes the defense work and makes that defensive coordinator work pre-snap and post-snap, because he's somewhere else on the field when opposing defenses know that he is the cornerstone of keeping that offense on track and being efficient and moving the ball and being that chain mover. And so a lot of game plans are surrounded and based upon Shakir and where he is located.
Yeah, I do wonder, what Joe Brady has in mind to change the structure of the offense based on the fact that, look, I think we have a lot of clues to know that they're not going to just have this overhaul, right? I mean, that's why he's the head coach now. Nobody felt that the offense needed to change that much. Mm-hmm. But we also know that Brady has given clues that they want to be a little bit more vertical. They want to be a little bit more attacking. And even Brandon Beane's kind of alluded to the fact that they want to be able to help him be able to do that. So I do wonder what that looks like personnel-wise of this team. And let's not forget, Dalton Kincaid's injury mattered last year. Yeah. Joshua Palmer's injuries mattered last year. You can't necessarily say, okay, we're going to rely on they're all going to be healthy for 17 games. I get that. But at least you have to start with a plan to say, like, this is where what these guys can bring, and we need to rely on them to be able to do that. But I do think that those guys being healthy, especially Kincaid, will matter to how this offense looks and runs.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Now, with the combine wrapped up, with you being on scene at Indy, any other news or nuggets you want to share before we get out of here?
So I asked Brandon Beane about some injury updates. He said that Tyler Bass is furthest along of the injured guys from last year who, were out, season-ending injuries. Landon Jackson, Michael Hoyt. Didn't ask about Dwayne Carter. I'm assuming he's in that same boat. So that's good news, but he would not give a timeline on any of them, which is not surprising. I think Michael Hoyt tweeted something or put on Instagram something about him wanting to be ready he's going to be ready by July 1st. That might be ambitious. I don't know, but it'd be great. Even if it's August 1st, I think that's fine, to be honest with you,
right.
For Michael Hoyt. So that's really good. And then, of course, there's been some talk about, and I didn't want to give any credence to Taron Johnson switching positions, but the fact that Brandon Beane didn't close the door on it, I think we at least have to keep that open and talk about it. And I still don't know how much space I want to give it, but I do respect what he said about it, which is, look, how much he's played as a nickel, that's going to change probably under Jim Leonard. So now you have a player who's what they think is a good football player. Yeah, he's getting older. He's 30 this year.
Yeah.
Making quite a bit of money. You don't save a ton for moving on. How do we maximize using him for the value, for the money we're paying him, if he's not going to have that same role to be on the field? And maybe that means a little bit more in a different role. So I do want to at least explore that a little bit and how that looks. So I thought that was really interesting too from Beane.
Yeah, the Taron Johnson conversation, along with the Shakir conversation, have kind of been driving forces this offseason. I just always say, hey, relative to the league, Taron Johnson's still a really good nickel. But I also think they don't want to reveal, hey, yeah, now we're in the nickel market, and here's the draft, and here's a combine. I also don't think they want to do that and show their hand, because I do think they draft a nickel, regardless. I think they do need to draft a nickel, specifically because of the scheme change and what I assume they're going to be playing on the back end. And Taron Johnson, we know where, his game is and the ceiling it's reached. And it's not typically in a man match type scheme like we're seeing under Jim Leonard. So I do think they're going to draft one anyways. And that's exciting to me, because I like some of the nickels. And the nickel safety hybrids in this draft too, man. That's going to be fun.
Speaking of that, a guy that we have not really thought about much, at least I haven't. And I'm like, why are we not giving more space to maybe Jordan Hancock having more of a role in this team next year? Last year it just didn't go as well for him, but look, it didn't the first year for Cole Bishop either, right? I mean, I just wonder, we talk about safety so much, and I do think they'll move off from Taylor Rapp. You'll save over $3 million, but it's a guy that I have not really thought as much about, and maybe Jim Leonard really likes him and figures there's a role for him. He is a safety nickel hybrid.
Yeah, and that's where the league is going. And if there's any team aside from, the Seahawks and the Cardinals that wants to play with 3 type safeties or hybrid type players, it would be Jim Leonard, who played safety and can play 3 type safety looks or hybrid safety players because of that odd front and the hybridization of the fronts and how that ties into the secondary. I think I've been calling for I call it the hybridization of the nickel and safety under Dermott the last 2 years, because I was told that during those years when the Bills were losing to the Chiefs, the tendency or the tells were from the nickel position and where they were aligning, and defenses were picking up what coverages they were being. And so that's why this year, when they started rotating, Taron a little more to the deep half and doing some of those inverted looks, I was like, yes, this is what the future of the NFL is. But also the position and combining the safety and nickel and having them not only have the physical attributes, but again, the high IQ and the football IQ to be able to play multiple positions and combine those positions. It's a fun conversation. I think that's where the league is going.
So what you're saying is they should re-sign Cam Lewis.
I mean, you can't hurt having Cam.
I say that because I'm known as like a big Cam
You
Lewis.
are.
I do love Cam Lewis, and people get on me about how much I've loved Cam or Jamarcus Ingram over the years. But those players are important. They're role players. I'm not saying these guys are all pros, but I brought up their names many times over the years, and they've been valuable players. And they lose Jamarcus Ingram, but Cam Lewis is a free agent. He's been in this system for a while, and I know it's a new system, but it's really kind of the type of player that I think that can be valuable, whether it's him or someone like
Hancock.
him.
I mean, they literally brought
like
him
that.
in. Yeah, I mean, that's Hancock, really. That's why they trained him at safety, but he's probably better as a nickel, played a lot of nickel in college. So I think you're onto something there. Maybe he's the next Cam Lewis. Maybe Jordan Hancock, at the very least, is the next Cam Lewis. So with that said, man, anything else you want to add from the combine? You've been crushing it this week, and I'm sure you're looking forward to a day off. Do you get a day off anytime soon?
I'm actually going on WGR today in about an hour and a half with the Sports Talk Saturday guys. Got to wrap up the combine a little bit. I get, last night was nice. Went out, went shopping with Max. Hadn't seen him pretty much all week. And then we went and had some dinner and watched the Sabres game together. So that was cool. Got a chance to do that. This weekend, I'll be doing the same kind of stuff. Got some baseball practice and hockey with him. Then it's back at it next week, and getting ready for free agency, which is really, I mean, you think about it, Erik. Free agency starts a week from Monday, really. Yep. I mean, I know that officially can't sign until the 11th, but the 9th, March 9th, right? Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of content. I just posted some stuff today. Here, really good message for everybody. If you are a content creator, you want to be a content creator, Erik's done an amazing job at Cover One, what he's built. And I had a great conversation with someone named Brian Nessmauer. He actually covers the Seattle Seahawks. He has a blog called Hawk Blogger, and he's his own independent, did it himself, and he's credentialed, and he talks to the GMs, the coaches, just like we all do at the combine. It's great. And I posted that on my YouTube at Sal Sports, our conversation about him and creating his own thing and how well it's gone for him. And I just think it's really good for anybody who wants to do this and get into the business. Yeah, they've been around for a good amount of time and do a great job covering the Seahawks as well. And as you guys all know, Turf to Tape is presented by Thin Man Brewery. And so if you guys haven't heard, I talked about it earlier, Chandler Street Breweries is now the home of Thin Man Brewery, Community Beer Works, and Smoldered Society Beer Company. It's located at 166 Chandler Street in Buffalo. Put the number there. They're open Wednesday through Sunday, open at noon every single day for lunch, and obviously for dinner. Looks like a cool spot now being the host for Thin Man Brewery and Community Beer Works. So if you haven't gone down there yet to this new tap room and location, check it out. On behalf of Cover One, we appreciate Thin Man Brewery and those guys sponsoring us for the year. So on behalf of Turf to Tape, I'm Erik Turner. That's Sal Capaccio. We'll see you next week.